Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another issue of the podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome longtime friend and industry colleague, Karen Baker, to the show. Welcome, Karen.
Hey, it's nice to talk to you. It's been a while.
Yeah, I feel super lucky, actually. I know you don't do many podcasts, don't go out there and work hard to be in the public eye all the time. So I feel pretty lucky to be able to get you to say yes to be on the podcast. I super appreciate it.
It was funny when you linked in me when I said, I normally say no to these and completely, but as soon as it's you, I'm going to say yes, because I think you have a lot of respect in this space. And I know people listen to your views. And I think, like me, you're sometimes controversial. And I respect that a lot about you, that you're not always worried about just saying the right thing. And I think so that was what drove me to say yes to you today. And obviously you're out in New Zealand as well, right?
Exactly. And I remember the first time I think we met would have been well over 10 years ago. And it would have been at a Magento event in Australia, I think may have been the first place. And then the next time we met was at Lero 9 in Auckland when you came and you were talking about Magento 2 in Auckland at the Lero 9 offices. So we've known each other, I think, for over 10 years now.
It feels like a very long time. Yeah. I remember that trip to Auckland. It was funny. Yeah. I walked in through customs, which is very strict there. And I had these labeled Coca-Cola bottles that had people's names on them for the event in Australia that I was going to. And they said, "What's in the box?" And I said, "Coke." And the guy gave me the funniest look ever and thought about sending me down the other queue, but then just laughed and let me go.
Yeah, you were like, not Coke as in the white powdery Coke,
Well, yeah,
more like the liquid Coke that you drink.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to backtrack it a little bit, and then he was just like, "This is too much. Just go." Like, I can tell you're just insane and not a drug carrier. So yeah, it was interesting. But Auckland's a fantastic place, and I miss it greatly. It's a shame we haven't been able to get out there or Australia to events. And it's good that you guys are all right. But I think everyone's had their battles during COVID, and it's been much fun. Some of the battles you guys have had. So I think some people sometimes underestimate just the fact that you've been in very strict lockdowns at times and then just cut off from the rest of the world. Yeah. So it's really nice to talk to you today and try and bridge that gap a little bit from England / Austin, Texas, which is where I am.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I was actually going to ask you about that. How did you end up from the UK? How did you end up in Austin? I haven't been to Austin, but I've heard it's an absolutely amazing place. It's like the Silicon Valley of Texas. Pretty much every single major player in our space has some sort of an office or a headquarters in Austin. It seems obviously BigCommerce has a big office and headquarters there. So how did you originally end up, before we get into the bowels of your career, because you've been in this space for so long, you're so well respected and you're a luminary. And look, you've broken down, I think, a lot of barriers in this industry as well, which I just respect that so much. And you have such a tremendous amount of respect in this industry. But how the heck did you end up in?
The short story is, well, I moved from England in 2013 and I actually went to Columbus, Ohio to start, and we were bootstrapped. We really couldn't afford to go to California or New York or places like that. And I had a friend down in Columbus and a few clients, and it looked beautiful. And so we moved there, and it felt accessible to England and the rest of the country. It's a good hub and it is a beautiful place. But then we had 2 pretty bad winters, and I'm from the south of England. And honestly, I know what you're on TV, but we don't really see a lot of snow there, and we certainly don't see a lot of cold. And I was like, wow, there's a whole nother level of cold up here. And I always thought I was a cold weather person, but no, I'm not. I'm a warm weather person. So I flew into Austin one night actually for a Magento 2. It's like a developer forum where they were basically getting feedback on Magento 2. It was the middle of January and people were cold, and I wasn't even wearing a jacket. I was like, this is like summer, basically. And anyway, I flew back to Ohio, which was in the frozen tundra. I think it was the worst weather for 40 years. And the previous year had been worst weather for 25 years. And I was like, I'm just not staying for year 3. Let's go to Austin. But I'd never actually seen it during the day, because during the day we were in this event. And then I told the team in the office, should we move to Austin? They all said yes. And then I had to go home and tell my husband, and he was like, what the hell, kind of thing. But really, it was the weather that drove me south more than the tech industry. But obviously, Magento is here, eCommerce is here. There's a number of logistics companies here, but I went to a meetup that summer, a Magento meetup, and I thought it would be very bustling. And there was like 3 of us at that meetup. And that was a bit of a shock to actually find out there wasn't really a Magento community in Austin, even though there was a lot of Magento people. So yeah, it was interesting. And it's interesting to look at it now with so many people coming in, because when like I run the Austin e-commerce meetup, for instance, and really nobody was running anything like that. So although like I think people go, oh, it's like the Silicon Valley of Texas and everyone's moving here and everything like that. And I thought I was late to the party, but actually in 2015, we were pretty early to the party. But it's a great place, really like it. It's definitely, I think, filling up fast. And I think everybody who's been here a while will go, please don't move here. And I'm probably in that camp as well. So I'm not going to sell it too much.
Well, I hope you'll let one more person in, because I've just gotten married last week. In fact, just got married, and thank you very much. Very exciting, and are potentially looking at Austin as a future hub for us, and looking at potentially moving out. Just as you pointed out, we're pretty over how ANZ has been handling COVID, and not very happy with where that's all headed at this stage. Yeah, looking at Austin as a potential place to shift to. Thank you all. I'll make sure to clear it with you before I fly.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's a good place. I think people don't realize that Austin is a democratic area, but in a republic state, right? And I think sometimes people don't realize that aspect to it, that there is that mixed dynamic here. And for me, I really like that. I like the hill country and I like the Texans. And I think I learned a couple of things in my life. And one of them is you should never forget where you come from. Don't ever forget that. But the other one is you have to embrace where you are. And I think when people move to Austin, I think remembering that is a good thing to do. And I'm a big fan of kind of understanding where you're living and understanding the local culture. And even if you don't always agree with it, like just respecting it and being aware of it. And I think that goes true for anywhere. When I lived in London, for instance, exactly the same I felt, But same in New Zealand. If you're going to move to New Zealand, you've got to respect what's going on there already and not try and trash that, if that makes sense. So
that's exactly the same situation I found myself in 25 years ago when I moved here. I didn't want to be one of those typical loud, arrogant Americans that comes in and tries to change a place that they moved to, or just constantly you hear them whinging about how it's not like America, or we get the occasional whinging palm here as well who says England has all these things. I think you get that with a lot of imports. People will always try to change things a little bit towards more like where they're from. And I tend to go the other way, which is if you like where you're from so much, then move back there, but don't move to a new place and try to impose your will or your culture on the local culture. And I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. You should first try to learn, first try to embrace, first try to assimilate in. And people have big issues with that term, assimilate. They prefer the word integrate, but I actually prefer the word assimilate, because if you're going to move somewhere, you really, in order to get the most out of that place, I think you do have to assimilate to a degree.
Yeah, you do. It doesn't. I try to stay out of politics. I'm very apolitical and stuff like that. I'm like not massively into guns or anything like that. Shoot a deer or anything, but shoot Bambi. But but I also understand and respect the people who live out in the countryside and doing that kind of stuff. And then likewise downtown, like just respecting the bars and the places and the reason that you moved there in the first place, and just making sure it comes back to that kind of supporting local and supporting the community that you live in. And I think especially with the advent of COVID, if there's one lesson for all of us from that, it's you've got to support the local community and keep these shops open. We're interactive people, right? Like, we're not people that can sit alone. We're people that sit as communities, and whatever that is for you, whether that's religion or sports or whatever, each to their own, I say, but respect each other. And I think over the years, even with us, we've had a kind of argument, shall we say, with people online and stuff like that. But it's always in a professional environment and respecting each other's kind of point of view and just questioning it. And I don't see any problem with that, even in e-commerce, of being able to have that healthy debate. But there's a big difference between that and just trashing somebody or trashing an area. So it just carries through life. It's just what your basic morals are.
Couldn't agree more. And that's probably a really nice segue into how you even got into this industry in the first place. Now, I know you did computer science at uni, so obviously you had a tech leaning to begin with in the first place. You worked for EDS Defense
Yeah.
as a tech lead there, then you were a tech specialist at Reuters, and then you pretty much leapt straight into WebShopApps. And that's actually when I first met you, or when you came onto my radar, was through WebShopApps for Magento. And this was obviously Magento 1 at the time. And did you just see a gap in the market and you went, hey, I see this e-commerce thing, it's becoming a really big deal, but I see problems and challenges and gaps in the market that I think I'm uniquely placed to help deal with, and I'm gonna jump in boots and all. How did WebShopApps initially come to be?
Yeah, I'm a very reluctant entrepreneur, is how I'd describe it. I won't even describe myself as an entrepreneur. Honestly, this is like a one gig only deal. And I started programming when I was like super young. I was like 9, 10 years old, and just my parents, one of the best things they ever did for me was get me a computer. I actually bought it from a brother who was 3 years older than me. And I'm very much a person that kind of hand to glove in with a computer and just love it, the business of it. And I always wanted to work corporate, and my dream, I'd say my idea of success was somebody sending me on a business trip. I was like, if somebody can actually send me out on a business trip and pay for that, then wow, like they believe in me. And I remember saying that to people when I was quite young. That's what I wanted to do. So it's so strange now to look back on that and think that I'm sending other people on business trips and have moved countries and everything. But the business, I think a lot of people have heard this story, so I'll just be really super brief. But my husband, we had 2 young children. My husband was selling on eBay, and then I went on sabbatical because the kids were like 1 and 3, and obviously they're a bit of a handful at that stage. And I don't think he was reluctantly looking after the children. And so I went on sabbatical from Reuters, and then twiddling around on the computer, and I decided just to set him up a shop. And that's when Magento 1.0 come out. So I was looking around for platforms and considering them, and I saw Magento 1. I thought, oh, this is amazing. And the community was great, the forums were great, and I created, I think, the first UK Magento store. But I'm not a front-end programmer. I'm much more of a back-end kind of system, sort of databases and models and business logic kind of programmer. I quite quickly got into the shipping side because I'm maths biased as well. But I didn't really choose to start the business. It was more a case of people just kept reaching out to me and saying, I released a free module, Matrix Rates. People just kept reaching out to me and it kept helping them. And then I realized that there was a shortage of skilled, I was by this time, 10, 11 years in this industry, skilled software engineers that could also do business solutions. And I think I just realized that I could fix their problems. But I didn't really go out to create a business. I honestly packed my job in just because I had to choose one way or the other because I was just exhausted. And I thought if I could get £100 a day, which was my goal, I could basically match what I was, earning pretty much and live. I wasn't quite matching what I was earning, but I was able to live on that money. And I decided one day I got off the tube and just packed my job in there and then around my husband. And again, I seem to do a lot of impulsive decisions. I think about stuff a lot, but when I act, I usually tell my husband last. But yeah, that was it. WebShopApps was born from there. It was actually an Australian guy that come up with the domain name. Can't remember his name, but I was talking to him on Skype and we were running through names and he come up with WebShopApps. And I was like, that's fantastic, let's get it. But I don't even remember that guy's name, so that's weird. But WebShopApps was a good little business. I like that.
It sounds like your husband has always been supportive of you, though. No matter what decision you made, it sounds like he was right behind you every step of the way. And maybe he questioned it at some point, but it sounds like either way, he was supportive.
Yeah, I got to say, because he's an electrician by trade, a lot of people don't realize he's an alpha kind of male builder type, right? Like he does a lot of building. And I don't think a lot of people realize that sometimes the man behind a woman who's successful is actually a very strong individual, but very kind of selfless, right? Like the fact that he's stood back in the background and let me pursue this and supported me all the way through it. Honestly, it's not without quite a lot of complaints along the way, just like any marriage, as you're going to find out, my friend. There's always but I think for a man to do that, especially if he's you got to remember there wasn't many stay-at-home dads at that time. They definitely existed, but nowhere near like today. I think it's a very selfless man that can do that. And I often say that I'm quite a, in a way, selfish person myself to just pursue my dream. And then the families really had to accommodate me doing that. But I hope that it is to provide them with a better future and more security, which is really the driver for me. It's not about fame or mountains or being the top of anything. It's just about basics of life, which I'm sure you have as well. What is the thing that's most important to you? It's probably security and family, right?
Yeah, and look, for me, I've wound my life back, I guess my lifestyle and the expectations around lifestyle right back. We don't have kids and we don't want children. We live in an off-grid tiny house because that's the lifestyle that we want, and we want to live as in harmony with the land as we possibly can while still having I guess most of the mod cons that you'd expect in a modern world. But we came to the realization that we actually need a lot less stuff in our life than and it took me a lot of years to come to this realization that we're much more about experiences than things. And instead of spending money on this, gigantic palatial home, actually in Auckland, you wouldn't be able to afford one anyway. But even if we could afford, that's not really where our heart lies. And so for us, it's about how can we create a lifestyle that we enjoy, that we love, that we can have the experiences that we want to have and have a relatively small footprint while we're doing it. It's a combination of things. And I think most people want to just have a decent lifestyle. Very few people go particularly into business. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, and I think you'd probably agree with this, we go into this knowing that it's fraught with risk, that the vast majority of businesses fail, that we really, as an entrepreneur, you've really got to have a passion for what you're doing. Otherwise, you're probably going to bail out of that at the first chance, because being an entrepreneur is hard. Running a startup is hard. Having staff is hard. And, there's just zero guarantee of success going into any of this stuff. And I remember back in the day, your matrix rate extension for Magento, it seemed to be on pretty much every single project or every single installation of Magento that I ever saw. And it became pretty obvious that you guys were a major player in the space. And like you say, you didn't necessarily set out to be a major player in the space, but if you do good work and you do it with good intent and a pure heart, then, you're stacking the deck in your favor for it to work out, right?
Yeah, I think because people go, oh, you're inspiring, or you're this, or you're that. And I just say that there's a lot to be said for working for somebody else and getting a paycheck. Like, I love that. I never wanted to work in a small company. I always liked corporate, and I always thought people that work for themselves are actually insane to lose their weekends and stuff like that. And it's ironic that I've been in a small company and working for myself. But there's another side to running a business that people just don't. You don't put it on social, you don't put it on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. And the long hours, and as much as you climb a mountain, right? You go, let's get here and then we can rest. And you get there and everything's bigger. And now you got to run faster, and you're putting more and more risk, right? Like you're constantly gambling and going back in. And if you don't, then it's a dangerous thing as you're in tech. If you're not growing, then that's a problem. So it really is about finding that balance of that. And I agree with you. I've seen a lot of people just burn themselves out, and I found it hard. But if you can find a good balance in your life, like, it's not about chasing or being the best at this or doing that. Like, it's really not. And I've just seen so many people so unhappy that have got to the top. Yeah, I'm very much about the journey. And I say that to the guys at work. I'm like, you need to enjoy this job on a daily basis. You can't just look at where are we going to be in 3-5 years. Don't do it. And I'm very keen for the staff to be like that. And if they don't like being at ShipperHQ, then you should move on. Always a good fit for people, and vice versa. And it's very important that people are happy. I truly believe that, right? Like, I think that's much more important driving a flashy car, or what does that matter? Like, it doesn't matter. So, yeah.
I think everybody should chase their version of happiness, no matter what that is. And I think if you focus on happiness and joy in your life without obviously trampling other people in the process, if you can make that your focus as opposed to the money or the fame or the power. If you can focus on what truly brings you joy and happiness in your life, and can bring and you can live with yourself, and you can live with your soul on a daily basis and go to bed at night feeling good about what you did during the day, then I think that's a very noble aspiration from my perspective. Now, more often than not, if you do that, then there's other elements of quote unquote success that typically go along with that. You're usually going to be able to make a living. You're usually going to be able to find your place in the world. You're usually going to be able to add something value to the world and create something and put it into the world. And for me, what I'm doing today is my art, right? So most people don't look at maybe what we do as an art form, but I think everybody has an art form inside them. And for some people, it's painting. For some people, it's sculpture. For some people, it's music. For people like us, it's tech. And so for me, my art is being able to write and draft solution documents and to think creatively about the solutions that I put together for clients and work with clients to put together. That's my art form. And then also being able to make content and put that out into the world is my art form, and being able to speak at events is my art form. And so for me, that there is an element of art to this. Whether it's traditional art or not is beside the point. It's an art, right? And it feels very much like you're pursuing your art and your passion as part of what you do and putting things out into the world.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do think when you grow a company, when we're like 75 people now, you get to a certain point, and I think it probably happens around about 15 people, 20 people, where you basically, you're paying their mortgages. They're helping you do that, but essentially the burden is yours. And like it becomes a lot about making sure that you're being responsible, and you have to grow up, right, and be an adult. I think when you're a very small company, it is very much about like a lot of blue sky thinking, a lot of execution, that kind of pure joy of a small company. And I would definitely recommend anybody doing it, stay small as long as you can get, because when you become a bigger machine, it's a very different to run the company of that size. And the art is definitely less now and much more about the management, shall we say. But for some people, that is the thing that is their art and their joy. But I miss the days of, like Matrix Rates was wrote in a weekend, and I miss the days of that. And like now I'm older, I wonder if I could still do something like that and stuff. But I miss that experimentation. But we all have to grow up.
Speaking of growing up, how did ShipperHQ come to be after obviously WebShopApps is still running, but really it's kind of evolved into ShipperHQ seems to be your focus now, your laser focus. How did it evolve? How did ShipperHQ come to be? And then when did you see the writing on the wall from Magento to a degree where you went, hey, Magento isn't the only game in town, and we really now need to find other platforms that we can write solutions for, because we think that there are actually gaps in the market. And I know my first exposure to ShipperHQ was through the Health Post implementation, and we as a business, and that was when I was still working merchant side, we just saw massive gaps in the shipping rules engine within BigCommerce. And we immediately saw, hey, this is just never going to cut it for a business of our scale and complexity. And ShipperHQ ticked all the boxes. And yes, it's a relatively expensive solution. And yes, it's a relatively complex solution. It also does what's on the tin. And it's a very complex solution for you guys to build and maintain and support. So it makes natural sense. But how did ShipperHQ itself come to be?
Yeah, it really depends how you're using it. You guys come from a Magento platform and a lot of table rates, right? And then you start at $50 a month. So people are using it in different degrees. Just switching on a date field and want accurate delivery dates, it's much simpler. But I think the Magento, a lot of the Magento stuff does get more complicated and requires much more of a service element that actually we're just now adding into the product and realizing that people need that kind of professional services aspect, and actually us going through it with them, because they are running in many cases mid to enterprise level environments, which deserves more than a $50 a month software solution. It also needs that consultancy. And I think we tried for quite a while just to do software. And I think not all problems can be solved by software. Quite a lot. And I think it's always improving, but not exclusively. But I really realized back in 2010, the move to SaaS would be very good for us and allow us to go cross-platform. So it was very early on. Like first employees were 2010. So really right at the start. First extension was 2008. I didn't pack my job into 2009. I started building it in 2011. And then when I come to the States, I basically split the team in two. So it's in 2013. I had a US team focused on ShipperHQ, and the UK team was focused on WebShopApps. And that worked quite well, because when we were trying to do it all in one office, it was just impossible. We just kept going back to WebShopApps. But really with WebShopApps, when they announced Magento 2, I was like, okay, these extensions are going to die at some point because the platform is going to die. So I really stopped investing on WebShopApps and focused my efforts on ShipperHQ. And we had enough revenue, luckily, to pay for the staff to build it. And it took us a good couple of years just to get an MVP. It's a big solution to transfer over, much bigger than we anticipated. So we really had the revenue on WebShopApps. Used to talk to the accountants and like go, how little do I need to take? And he was like, are you insane? You need to build this business. And I was like, no, I don't. I need to build ShipperHQ.
Yeah.
And so he thought I was absolutely around the twist. He's like, you're throwing away business. And I was like, no, I just want easy business. I don't want anything that takes up my time because I want to focus my time on this new product. And I think it takes a brave company, right, to go, we're going to throw away something that's highly successful and the brand. And that's exactly what we did. WebShopApps did not suit the name that we needed, and it was much more generic. And so we picked ShipperHQ, and then we really doubled down on the shipping experience layer and just saw a real need for that, really from demand from WebShopApps. And we had over 25,000 paying customers on there. I don't know what it is today, 70, 80, 90,000 downloads of our software. So there was a need. And all I did was let's fill the need. It's as simple as that, really. But
wow.
Magento 2, the demise, I really saw that in 2010 as well. I remember talking to Yoav and saying to him, you could compete against me, and being very worried about having all my eggs in one basket. And ultimately, I'm trying to protect my kids' future and my staff's future. And I could see that was a single point of failure. And it's really as simple as that. BigCommerce come along, Tim Schultz was there at the time, and I went and demoed ShipperHQ in really early days of ShipperHQ. They loved it and it filled a gap, and they agreed to put it in their core, and it's still in there and we give it away for free on Enterprise, the Essentials plan. And BigCommerce and Brent Belm have been incredibly good to me, especially as one of the nicest CEOs that I've ever interacted with, if not the nicest. But he holds no prisoners. He's very ruled by the economics, the revenue, what we do for him, and it's a mutual partnership. But we have a great deal, I think, of respect for each other as well, which really helps. And it's nice to have somebody like that out there that I know I could ring him up, and we don't talk to each other a lot, but I know that I could ring him up and he would talk to me. And I did actually ring him when COVID hit. Brent, I'm scared of this, right? What's going to happen? And he had a chat with me, and you can't really ask for a better partnership than that. So
wow, that is amazing.
Yeah,
I agree. I think I had dinner in Australia with Brent and the BigCommerce team from the Sydney office, and that was not long after Brent had actually taken over the reins of the business. And I couldn't agree with you more. Super down to earth guy.
Exactly.
Right into his cycling. He's a man on a mission. There's no question about that. And he's very clear on where he wants to take the business. And I think he's got that ability to communicate that vision back to the business, and more power to him in terms of taking the business public and really becoming that ultra scrappy competitor versus what seems like an all-conquering Shopify at times, and really sticking to his guns and moving up the enterprise stack. How do you see their shift up the enterprise stack, I guess, almost coincides to a degree with ShipperHQ's move up the enterprise stack? And for those that don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit about, I've got my own ideas based on my own implementation of ShipperHQ, and I know just how powerful it is and all the things it can do, but maybe in a nutshell, you could just describe some of the key features of ShipperHQ and the gaps that it fills in the market, because they are substantial. They are substantial gaps that ShipperHQ took you a couple of years to build it, and you continue to rapidly build it out to this day. And it is a big piece of software. It is a big bit of kit.
Yeah, we actually build it, and you can probably tell even now when you go in there, for the mid-market to enterprise, for the hardest clients that we had, which is completely the wrong way around, building the SaaS solution. I'd never recommend it. But even now, we're trying to dumb down the dashboard and make that UX experience a lot better for people, and putting much more automation around workflows and stuff like that. It's a very powerful piece of software. It really just sits, it's ISA, and PayPal will hate this, but I always go, we are to shipping in the checkout like PayPal is to payments, is the easiest way of looking at it. We are that shipping component in checkout and provide all of the functionality for a complete shipping checkout experience, whether that's store pickup, multi-warehouse, drop ship stuff, packing. We'll pack boxes. So if you're selling wine or shampoo or plain, like small model planes and stuff like that, we work out different ways of packing and sell that worldwide. So whether that's into the B2B space where you're using lift gates and LTL, or out in New Zealand where there's a lot of table rate stuff and a lot of stuff around postcodes and zip codes. But it really is that rule logic of the big thing I always say is a lot of people going towards free shipping, and Amazon, one in $3 that they make goes on shipping, which is crazy. Not their profit, like their gross, right, on their sales. They're basically sustained by by AWS. It's as simple as that. If without that, they wouldn't exist. But so there's a lot of effort goes into like that free shipping idea. Merchants are not going to match that. You can't spend $1 and $3 on free shipping. But what you can do is offer free shipping, but offer that with things like longer lead times, and then try and upsell people to get it quicker. Like next day delivery, which is like 1 in 4 customers needs it urgently. Well, surcharge the next day, because these are often business customers that are willing to pay more to get it next day. And then you're going to have this kind of group of customers that will only use free shipping. That's fine. They have to wait for it. And then you're upselling them on the product side in the cart to try and get them to add more to the basket, and understanding when you can do free shipping and when you can't do free shipping. For instance, selling a fishing rod, it's a difficult thing to pack. It's quite long dimensionally and it's a hard thing to do. If they're just buying, I don't know, expensive hooks or something like that, and you've got a big profit margin there, easier to pack, just throw it out free shipping. So that product category side is really important. I don't think enough people really consider their shipping strategy. And that's one of the things that we've put in is around that consultancy side to just help merchants understand that there is more to this. And nowadays with the supply chain problems, I don't know what it's like over in New Zealand, but we've definitely had issues over here. People want to know when they're going to get it. And that should be on every checkout in the world. And we've seen customers get 50, 60% lift in sales just by displaying a date. But what's important is to display a date that actually is. Displaying a date and then missing it, you'd be better off just giving an estimated delivery time and keeping it at that. And then, but even now, how many checkouts do you go on, Jason, where you don't see a date?
I'd say 1 in 100 of my experiences show a date.
Exactly. But it does put you off a bite. And then you're searching around, trying to find what the delivery things are. And then as soon as you place the order, you're kind of, it's like this subconscious worrying. And this is why people use Amazon. That's the only reason. They want to shop independent. I'm sure, what is Amazon like in New Zealand? Do you have a big presence over there? I know it's in Australia, but not so much. What's it like
not so
in New
much
Zealand?
in New Zealand. It's less now that Australian Amazon has been opened up to buying to Kiwis. Obviously, there's been an increase in uptake. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but that's only been in the last few months. That's only been in the last 6 months. Amazon is not hugely on the Kiwi radar, apart from buying from American Amazon from the few items that you can actually have shipped in.
Okay, yeah. But I imagine New Zealanders, much like anyone, right? Like we want to support our area. And I think it's a little easier actually in New Zealand. I noticed this in England. It's easier to find the shops online. Like you can search for a bike shop in England and Halfords will come up or Evans or something like that. When you're in America, it's much harder to find the online shops, especially as an outsider, you know, and find the good places to go. And I think that's where Amazon comes in, is around that trust and knowing. And I think that just putting that date in the checkout immediately builds trust. And shipping is the first physical point of contact with a customer. That's the first time that physically you're there with them. So there's a lot of stuff around that people really care about, especially when it's a gift. And if that gift arrives late or it arrives damaged or it's not what they expect, you haven't told them how big it is, you've misrepresented it, then that disappointment is immediate and long lasting. And I think merchants really need to understand that, because they put a lot of effort into other things like rewards programs or gifts or this, that, and the other, right? Great pictures and everything else. But you have to understand when it lands on somebody's doorstep, it's all about that. And I don't know that people truly dissect that. And they should.
I think businesses oftentimes also overlook the complexity that potentially should be introduced into their shipping. What I mean is back-end complexity to prevent front-end complexity for the customer. So businesses oftentimes don't want to digest that back-end pain in terms of, I remember at HealthPost, we had something like 50 hyper complex shipping rules that were not supported out of the box in BigCommerce, but were able to be implemented in ShipperHQ. Now, the reason for that is, and it wasn't just complexity for the sake of complexity. It was there to actually remove complexity and uncertainty for the customer on the front end instead. And I think a lot of businesses forget that by doing that, by onboarding that complexity into the business and digesting that complexity on behalf of the customer, then they're actually doing their customer a service. And if they don't do that, then they're doing them a very big disservice. And what a lot of brands do, particularly when they're small, instead of setting those rules in an engine like ShipperHQ and being able to handle that on a dynamic basis, they go, for these outliers, even if it's only 10% of our orders, we'll deal with that when we receive the order. We'll contact the customer. We'll work out the changes difference in
Exactly.
billing or
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff, but it creates so much friction for the customer, and it absolutely ruins the customer experience to the point where a customer may put up with that once, but they're certainly not going to put up with it twice. And so they know, hey, what I got charged on this order is not what I ended up paying, or I ended up having to have things removed from my order because they couldn't be shipped to my location, but they didn't say that to me at checkout. And so now I've been refunded $30 of my order because this item can't be shipped to me. Or there's 101 reasons why a business gets shipping wrong at checkout, and 101 ways they can get it wrong at checkout. And it's actually hard to get it fully, particularly if you play across many categories, many complex product types, many destinations, and you're doing cross-border shipping, you're dealing with multiple couriers. Logistics is massively complex for e-commerce. It's just that simple. And those of us that have been in the game long time know that oftentimes the profitability game in e-commerce is won or lost in the shipping arena. And so I think there's businesses that just overlook the opportunity that the logistics experience and the checkout experience as it relates to shipping. They don't understand the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. It does, people say that to me. I remember, I don't get so much involved with the customer side now, but they would say, "Can you show me a checkout where ShipperHQ is on?" And quite often I'll say, "I can." But to be honest with you, you wouldn't even know it was there, because what you'll see is one option or two options. And what you need to see is what's fueling that underneath. And it's exactly what you're saying. And people, it is a massive consideration. And I think it amazes me that I think that the merchants do understand it. I think the trouble is sometimes on the merchant side is that they're used to dealing with customers and goods and stuff like that, not actually turning that into what essentially in some cases it's like maths. And we're working really hard at ShipperHQ to keep abstracting that out to make that easy for them, just like their goal is to make this easy for the customer. And that's the real challenge of all of this, is to try and make this so that the merchant really can just go, I do this, I do that, we do this, and we go, yeah, okay, got it, do it. But the reality is that people do have complex shipping needs in some cases in specific verticals, and it's about understanding that and then being able to go and put that inside and present that. And ShipperHQ can do whatever you want. I would say it covers a good 98% of shipping scenarios in the checkout, but whether or not you should switch them all on is another thing. And sometimes we get people that do try, switch every single thing on, and you're like, maybe you just need to calm down a little bit there and slow walk into this. And I'm a big believer in simplicity and trying to keep I call it peeling the onion. I use say the same to guys at work. I'm like, we're not trying to segment an orange. Let's peel the onion, right? So you keep cutting away at this in that kind of rotational fashion. And I think we should all be thinking like that in terms of tech, instead of trying to find utopia. And if you keep iterating, it's amazing what you can build.
Eat the elephant one bite at a time is a saying that I'm a very big fan of. Oh, and another one that's very Kiwi is don't try to boil the ocean.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, the elephant one bite at a time is one I often use at work. And there's another one that we use, which is, what is it? You need to break eggs to make omelets. And that's interesting. So when you're growing, sometimes things need to break from a structural and process level in order to support the bigger company. So yeah, that's a new one, the breaking eggs and making omelets. But I get it, but I don't really like breaking things.
I know. I feel especially on production environments.
Exactly. You got to be really careful. I don't know why I did it. Like sometimes I sit there and go.
I'm so glad that you did, and I know that there are tens of thousands of businesses all over the world that are very glad that you did. Now, if we start thinking about some of the, I guess what I always try to do is I try to break down some of the simpler use cases for some of the software that I review and that we have on the podcast. And for you guys, one of the things where, and I'll let you talk about some of the key use cases as being quite common across your customer base pretty universally. But I know that when I was at HealthPost, obviously you're working in a highly regulated environment. And I see ShipperHQ, particularly in highly regulated environments, as being just an absolute godsend. And when I say highly regulated environment, HealthPost deals in natural health and nutrition products as well as natural foods such as honey and things like that. And when you're dealing in that space, there are very serious cross-border restrictions on certain products that can't be exported to certain countries, certain products that can't be shipped even into certain states in certain countries. Like, for example, if you're shipping honey products into Australia, there's certain states that you can ship it to, but you can't ship it, I think it's into the Northern Territory and Western Australia. So there's certain really strict regional and country level rules. And then you've got obviously multi-origin shipping to think about when it comes from multiple locations, and then thinking about how do we charge for that if different products come from certain locations and have to be shipped to certain locations. And then you have a scenario where you might want the shipping cost to be based on order value, or a combination of the two, or a combination of the origination and destination addresses and weight and order value. So you've got these really, and sometimes that needs to be down to the category, product category level, or even the SKU level. And that's just not possible with pretty much any out of the box e-commerce platform out there.
Yeah.
These really hyper complex rules on their own, plus the interplay of those rules and the cascading rule set that oftentimes needs to be set into place, whereby, you know, you might on a certain product or a certain category, because of those weird volumetric sizes of those products, you might need to add an automatic surcharge. So there's, and even with certain payment methods, you may want to add a surcharge to the freight because you're losing so much money on the shipping. So there's quite a lot of scenarios that something like ShipperHQ can solve for, that just the out of the box solutions just could never do that.
Yeah, they don't even begin. And I think sometimes they don't even appreciate it. And I think one of the reasons why they don't appreciate it is because certainly on Magento and BigCommerce, we've always been so, we've
always solved the problem for them.
We've solved the problem. I remember somebody in Magento saying, this isn't a problem. I'm like, yeah, I've got all your customers. I know it's not a problem for you. But I've solved it. And we see that increase with Shopify, which is, we entered Shopify fairly late on, but certainly in the Shopify Plus area, we're seeing massive traction on that for the business. So it's the same over there, even though we entered that one. I have a maths background, and there's a lot that goes into this around, if you buy, say, a lamp, there's a shipping price for a lamp, and that's a very awkward product to ship, and it depends whether or not you buy it with a lampshade or without and stuff like that. But if you buy a bed, the rules will completely change. And so you've got a bed and a lampshade. Now what happens? We have people in some verticals like ice cream. Jenny's Ice Cream in the US is a company we support. Well, you can't ship ice cream at the weekend, so you can't deliver that on a Monday. And sometimes production-wise, we'll see companies, if they're doing things like artwork and stuff like that, well, their guys may not work to produce it on a Thursday and Friday. They might only work Monday to Wednesday. That affects the shipping. People that are shipping even meats, ice boxes, things like that, that they might only bring in the people to do that processing once a week. And understanding that and being able to set that up, but then also to understand, when is it one ice box or two? When do we need two of these? Because dry ice is a very expensive commodity. So there's just so many variations on this. Store pickup is another one. You see a lot of people where they go, people say this all the time, people paid free for store pickup, but they live 400 miles away. And I'm like, don't show it. Yeah. And they're like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, that's where you need ShipperHQ. You know, like I have their friends who sort of have shops and stuff, and they'll say this to me, and then I'll be like, that's what I do. But that's my kind of brag, basically. But then I go, don't come and see me though. I don't actually deal with customers that much anymore. So I do with my friends. I'm like, because they think they're going to get me to set it all up. And I'm like, I just can't, probably barely use the software at this point. So I don't have the time anymore. So it's a bit like your friends going to you, can you fix my printer? People say to me, can you fix my shipping? Well, I could.
But I have a team for that. So yes, we can fix your shipping.
Well, yeah, you know what I'm saying? You must have had this when you were younger. You tell people you're into computers and they ask you to fix their printer. Well, I tell people I'm into shipping and they ask me to fix their shipping, and I'm like, there's too many of those occasions.
I feel you. Well, look, this has been an absolutely amazing walk down memory lane, and I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me about how you got to be where you are. You've been really open and honest and sort of opening the kimono for us. And I love it. I love what you've done for the industry. I love how vocal you are. We both aren't afraid of shaking a few hornets' nests when we feel it's required. That open letter to Magento that you wrote a few years ago, it shook a few hornets' nests that I think needed to be shook at the time. And look, I have always respected your voice in the community And it hasn't always been the loudest voice, but it's certainly been very transparent, very honest, vocal when you needed to be, and vocal when you felt like you had a point of view that you wanted to express. And you're really transparent. And I just have such an incredible amount of respect for you, and the sheer amount of time that you've been in this industry, and you've been able to put up with this industry for so many years and continue to do what you do at such a high standard. I think that you should be incredibly proud of that, because I think that the Magento industry itself has a lot to thank you for. I think that the shipping industry has a lot to thank you for. And look, we could probably spend another hour talking about how you play nice with local courier integrators and direct with ERPs and WMSs and OMSs. But in a nutshell, your technology really allows even small businesses to act like big businesses when it comes to freight handling and when it comes to the shipping experience on the website for the customer. And I think for me, that's the key. That's the takeaway. It is, you allow businesses from $0 in revenue all the way up to $100 million plus in revenue to act like big businesses, to act more like Amazon in the way that they control and manage both the shipping experience, how they manage their shipping costs, and how they create, just really when it comes down to the UX, but also how can the team create that UX using your software. Look, this is a piece of technology that is pretty standalone in the community because there's just nothing else like it out there. And I think you should be immensely proud because you've done it.
If I ever go and create a pitch deck, then I just need to bring you in the room because I feel like you can say it better than me. But no, it's been great. And I just want to say, having people like you in the ecosystem is wonderful. I think there's been times that both of us have stood in the wind and kind of taken the critique off of people. But I think understanding that ultimately, I think that when people stand up and not necessarily even saying stuff that's right, but actually questioning, that's a very powerful thing. And people should respect and understand the value that plays. And I know you've done that many times, and it's been great for me. Like, we're all at Magento community, especially, and I know more recently the big commerce community, and you see it in Shopify as well. But the way that we can be all around the world and yet still be friends and still respect each other professionally and have a conversation, that's what keeps me still in it. And I hope I'll get back to New Zealand one day, and I feel like you might be in Austin before I manage to get inside New Zealand. So we need to go out for beers, and maybe next time we should have a really controversial discussion.
I'm absolutely confident we can shake a few hornets' nests together, that's for sure. But I totally agree with you. Look, I feel privileged to be part of this community over the last 20 plus years. It has been an amazing ride. Crazy. And look, it's insane to think how long we've been doing what we've been doing. And I know we've just dated ourselves, but it is super cool. And there are some amazing people in this industry that make it all worthwhile. And then, of course, the amazing merchants we get to work with as well as we traverse down this.
It's great. This path. It's really great.
It is awesome. It is good. And I want to thank you again for coming on to the pod. I know you don't do many of these. And
don't do many. This could be it, you know?
Yeah, let's do it again maybe in another 12 months, and I'll try to wrestle and twist your arm in another 12 months or so, and we'll see what new things have been added to ShipperHQ in the meantime, because I'm sure there'll be lots of new sexy things there.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely do. Hopefully I'll see you before then. So take care of yourself.
I hope so too. What is, just before we nip off, is there anything outstanding on the ShipperHQ radar that we should keep our eyes out for over the next, say, 2 to 6 months?
Oh, there's a ton. We're bringing out a lightweight version of it for the SMB market, and the Amazon style checkout is just going from strength to strength, bringing that to Shopify and BigCommerce, and the analytics engine that's in there that really is like starting to really get into, is this working, and look at giving you various options around changing your rules and testing that. I think that's a very powerful feature add that we've got coming in. So and creating a lot more partnerships on the back end, like the partnership with ShipStation is pretty powerful in order to drive them to really take our data and speed up that pick and pack line. So we're pretty excited about that too.
Wow. So I am super excited. I cannot wait to see what comes out in the future of ShipperHQ. Thanks again, Karen, and I will chat again soon.
Yeah, take care, mate.
Thanks for listening to the At the Coalface podcast. If you want more At the Coalface, you can subscribe to our premium e-commerce and digital newsletter, At the Coalface Digest.